A night in Pompeii, the last days of the Roman Empire. Hey guys, welcome to Nightwatch Historian. Tonight we're diving into something special, a complete Roman experience that'll make you grateful for indoor plumbing and democracy. Forget everything Hollywood told you about togas and gladiators. This is the real story of what it was like to live in the Roman Empire, and trust me, you probably wouldn't last a week. So before you get too comfortable, hit that like button if you enjoy this kind of deep dive, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And remember that you can watch these videos without ads on my Patreon. You have the link in the description. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a snack, and let's jump in. We're going to spend the next hour and 46 minutes walking through a day in Pompeii, circa 79 CE. That's right, we're visiting the most famous Roman city on literally the worst possible day in its history. But here's the thing, you don't know that yet. In our story, you're just a regular person trying to make it through another day in the empire. You wake up to what seems like a normal morning, go about your business, maybe complain about the weather, and then Mount Vesuvius decides to have the world's most catastrophic temper tantrum. Chapter 1. Dawn in Pompeii. You wake up to the sound of cartwheels grinding against volcanic stone. It's still dark outside, but the city is already stirring. Your bed isn't much, a wooden frame with rope netting and a straw mattress that's probably harboring more wildlife than you'd care to think about. The pillow, it's filled with feathers if you're lucky, or more likely, just tightly packed rags. The air in your small room is thick and stifling. There's no glass in your window, just wooden shutters that you keep closed at night to keep out the cold, the noise, and the occasional drunk Roman stumbling home from the tavern. When you push them open, the smell hits you immediately. And oh, what a smell it is. Imagine every garbage truck in your neighborhood decided to have a meeting right outside your window. Then add the delightful aroma of human waste, rotting fish, and whatever mystery meat the butcher down the street is trying to pass off as today's special. This is Pompeii in the morning, folks. The city of 20,000 people who apparently never heard of proper sewage management. You stumble to your feet, and immediately your bare soles meet the cold stone floor. No carpets here. Those are for the wealthy Romans living in their fancy villas, with their heated floors and marble statues. You're what historians politely call working class, which is ancient speak for one bad harvest away from selling your children into slavery. Your first stop? The communal latrine down the hall. And let me tell you, if you thought airplane bathrooms were bad, you haven't experienced true horror until you've used a Roman public toilet. Picture this, a long stone bench with circular holes cut out, and underneath, a channel of flowing water that's supposed to carry waste away. Supposed to being the key phrase here. There's no toilet paper. Instead, you get a sponge on a stick. Yes, a literal sponge on a stick that everyone shares. Everyone. Let that sink in for a moment. The Romans invented concrete, aqueducts, and a legal system that still influences us today, but personal hygiene, that was apparently optional. And here's where it gets really fun. Romans didn't believe in privacy. The latrine is a social space. You're sitting there, doing your business, and Gaius from down the street is discussing last night's chariot races, while Marcus complains about his wife's cooking. It's like Twitter, but with more direct eye contact and significantly worse smells. You finish your business, and trust me, you want to finish quickly, and head to the fountain in the courtyard to splash some water on your face. The water is cool and actually pretty clean, thanks to the aqueduct system. Say what you will about the Romans, but they knew how to move water around. Too bad they couldn't figure out soap. Actually, that's not entirely true. The Romans had soap, but it was expensive and mostly used for cleaning clothes, not people. For personal hygiene, you'd use olive oil and a metal scraper called a strigil. Basically, you'd rub oil all over your body, then scrape it off along with the dirt and dead skin. It's like exfoliating, but with the added bonus of smelling like a salad. As you're getting ready for the day, you can hear the city coming alive around you. Merchants are setting up their stalls. Animals are being led to market. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear the rhythmic pounding of the fullers, the people who clean cloth by stomping on it in vats of urine. Yes, urine. The Romans believed human pee was the best cleaning agent available. They weren't wrong, technically, but still, gross. You throw on your tunic, basically a glorified t-shirt that goes down to your knees, and if you're feeling fancy, maybe a cloak. No underwear, by the way. Romans didn't really do undergarments. The closest thing was a sublugura, which was basically a loincloth, but most people just went commando. In a world without washing machines, this was probably the more practical choice. Your breakfast is simple. Bread, maybe some cheese if you're lucky, and wine mixed with water. Yes, wine for breakfast. The Romans drank wine like we drink coffee, and they usually diluted it because straight wine was considered barbaric. Only barbarians and alcoholics drank undiluted wine, and you, my friend, are neither. The bread is hard and gritty. Roman flour wasn't exactly Wonder Bread quality. It was made from whatever grains were available, and it often included bits of stone from the grinding process. Roman teeth were not in good shape, let me tell you. Dental hygiene was about as advanced as a medieval torture device. Chapter 2. The Streets of Pompeii. You step out into the streets of Pompeii, and it's like stepping into organized chaos. The streets are narrow, barely wide enough for a car to pass through, and they're paved with those large flat stones that look so picturesque in photos, but are absolute murder on your feet. The streets are also rivers of filth. There's no garbage collection, so people just throw their waste out the windows. Food scraps, broken pottery, and yes, human waste, all just tossed into the street. The Romans did have a saying, cave canem, beware of the dog, but they should have had one that said cave stecor, beware of the poop. You're walking carefully, trying to avoid the worst of the mess, when you hear a shout from above, aqua. It's the universal Roman warning that someone's about to empty their chamber pot out the window. You dodge just in time to avoid a shower of, well, let's just say it wasn't water. The noise is incredible. Picture the loudest construction site you've ever heard, then add the sounds of 20,000 people trying to live their lives in a space about the size of a small neighborhood. There's shouting, laughing, crying, the clatter of cartwheels, the braying of donkeys, and underneath it all, the constant hum of conversation in Latin. You're making your way to the Forum, the heart of the city, where all the important business happens. It's early, but the streets are already packed. There are slaves carrying amphoras of wine and oil, their wooden sandals clacking against the stone. There are merchants leading pack animals loaded with goods from all over the empire. There are children running between the adults, playing games and probably picking pockets. And there are the smells. Oh, the smells. We've covered the basic sewage situation, but let's talk about the other aromatic delights of Roman city life. There's the smell of fish sauce, garum, which the Romans put on everything. It's made from fermented fish guts, and it smells about as appetizing as it sounds. There's the smell of burning charcoal from the bakeries and workshops. There's the smell of animals, lots of animals, because this is still a largely agricultural society. But perhaps the most distinctive smell is the smell of the fuller's workshops. Remember those guys who clean cloth by stomping on it in vats of urine? Well, they're not just using any old urine. They're using the freshest, most potent urine available, which means they're literally paying people to pee in their workshops. There are signs advertising good prices paid for fresh urine. It's like a really, really terrible job posting. You pass a tavern where the night shift is just finishing up. Roman bars never really closed. They just had different crowds at different times. The morning crowd is mostly workers grabbing a quick bite before heading to their jobs. The wine is cheap, the food is questionable, and the conversation is loud and often profane. Roman profanity, by the way, was incredibly creative. They had insults that would make a modern sailor blush. My personal favorite is Sakinabe, which was basically calling someone well, let's just say it questioned their masculinity in very specific terms. Romans were not subtle people. You're walking past a bakery, and the smell of fresh bread temporarily overpowers the general urban funk. The baker is already at work, and you can see loaves cooling on wooden shelves. Roman bread was the staff of life, literally. The government provided free bread to Roman citizens as part of the bread and circuses policy designed to keep the masses happy and docilely. But here's the thing about Roman bread. It was often more filler than flour. Bakers would add whatever was cheap and available, beans, barley, even sawdust, if they thought they could get away with it. The wealthy got white bread made from the finest flour, while the poor got bread that was barely one step above animal feed. You notice a commotion ahead. A group of people has gathered around a posted announcement. You push through the crowd, and trust me, personal space was not a Roman concept to see what's happening. It's a notice about gladiatorial games coming to the amphitheater. The crowd is excited, chattering about which gladiators they want to see and what kinds of exotic animals might be featured. Now let's talk about gladiators for a minute, because Hollywood has given us some seriously wrong ideas about them. First, they weren't all slaves. Many were volunteers, free men who chose to become gladiators for the fame and money. Second, they didn't fight to the death in every match. Gladiators were expensive to train and maintain, so killing them willy-nilly was bad business. But they did die, often, and the crowds loved it. Romans had a very different relationship with violence than we do. Public executions were entertainment. Watching people get torn apart by wild animals was a fun afternoon activity. The Colosseum had a saying, "Morituri te salutant." Those who are about to die salute you. It wasn't just a movie line, it was a real thing. Chapter 3. The Forum and Morning Business. You finally reach the Forum, and it's like stepping into the beating heart of the empire. The Forum is a large open space surrounded by columns, temples, and government buildings. It's where all the important business of the city happens: trade, politics, religion, and social interaction. The first thing you notice is the noise. Everyone is talking at once, and they're all talking loudly. Romans didn't have a concept of indoor voice. If you had something to say, you said it at full volume, whether you were discussing the price of fish or the latest political scandal. And there's always a political scandal. Roman politics were like a soap opera written by people with really sharp knives. Senators were constantly plotting against each other. Emperors were always worried about assassins, and everyone was trying to figure out who was sleeping with whom and how it might affect their business interests. You're here on business. You need to buy supplies for your shop. You're a craftsman, maybe a potter or a metal worker, and you need raw materials. The Forum is filled with merchants from all over the empire, selling everything from British wool to Chinese silk to African ivory. You approach a merchant who's selling clay. He's a grizzled old man with skin like leather and a voice like sandpaper. He's been in business for 40 years, and he's seen every trick in the book. You start to negotiate, and it's immediately clear that this is going to be a performance. Roman negotiation was an art form. Nobody paid the asking price for anything. If you did, you were either an idiot or a foreigner. And in the Roman mind, those were often the same thing. The expected routine was to act shocked at the price, declare that you could get better quality elsewhere, and then slowly work your way toward a mutually acceptable number. 50 denarii for this clay, you say, picking up a handful and examining it critically. I've seen better quality mud in the streets after a rainstorm. The merchant clutches his chest dramatically. 50 denarii. My friend, this is the finest clay from the hills of Campania. It's blessed by the gods themselves. Look at the color. Feel the texture. This clay will make pottery that will last for centuries. Maybe, you say, but I notice it's got stones in it. And is that a piece of pottery mixed in? You're selling me broken pottery to make new pottery? The merchant laughs. Ah, you have a good eye. But those aren't flaws, they're features. The stones provide strength. The pottery pieces add character. This is premium recycled clay, very popular with the fashionable potters in Rome. And so it goes. You'll probably end up paying about 30 denarii, which is still more than you wanted to spend, but less than he wanted to charge. Both of you will walk away feeling like you got a decent deal, even though you both know you could have gotten the same clay outside the city for half the price. While you're haggling, you notice a crowd gathering near the temple of Jupiter. There's going to be a sacrifice, and people are excited. Roman religion was very practical. You made offerings to the gods in exchange for specific favors. Need rain for your crops, sacrifice a goat to Jupiter, want your business to prosper, offer some wine to Mercury, hoping your mother-in-law will get eaten by a lion, or that might require a bigger sacrifice. The priest is preparing the altar, and the animal, a young bull, is being led forward. The bull doesn't seem particularly concerned about its fate, which is probably for the best. Roman animal sacrifice was supposed to be quick and clean, but let's be honest, it was still pretty brutal by modern standards. The priest raises his knife, and the crowd falls silent. Then, in one swift motion, he cuts the bull's throat. Blood pours out onto the altar, and the crowd cheers. The priest examines the entrails. This is called haruspicy, looking for signs from the gods about the future. The liver is clear, he announces, and the heart is strong. The gods are pleased with our offering. They promise prosperity and good fortune for our city. The crowd cheers again, and you can't help but feel a little better about the day ahead. Sure, you just watched an animal get killed in front of a cheering crowd, but hey, the gods are happy. What could go wrong? You finish your business in the forum and start to head back toward your shop. But as you're walking, you notice something odd. There's a strange smell in the air. Not the usual urban funk, but something else. Something sulfurous, like rotten eggs. And there's a weird haze in the sky, like smoke, but not quite. You look up at Mount Vesuvius, which looms over the city like a sleeping giant. It's been quiet for as long as anyone can remember, just a big, peaceful mountain with fertile slopes perfect for growing grapes. But today, there seems to be a thin plume of smoke rising from the peak. Probably just the gods having a barbecue, jokes a passing merchant, but you notice he's looking at the mountain with a worried expression. You shake your head and keep walking. You've got work to do, and you can't spend all day staring at mountains. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Chapter 4. The Workshop and Daily Labor. Your workshop is a small, cramped space attached to your living quarters. It's not much. A few tools, a workbench, and shelves lined with your finished products. But it's yours, and in the Roman world, that's something to be proud of. You're a potter, and your specialty is everyday items. Bowls, cups, storage jars, and the occasional decorative piece for someone with more money than sense. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it pays the bills, most of the time. You start by examining yesterday's work. You have several pieces that were fired in the kiln overnight, and you're pleased to see that most of them came out well. One bowl has a small crack, but you can probably still sell it at a discount. Nothing goes to waste in the Roman economy. Your first customer of the day is a woman named Livia. She's the wife of a successful merchant, and she's looking for a new set of dishes for entertaining. She's the kind of customer you love. She has money, she knows what she wants, and she's not going to spend an hour haggling over every last sesterces. I need something elegant, she says, examining your work with a critical eye. My husband is entertaining some clients from Gaul next week, and I want to make a good impression. You show her a set of bowls decorated with a simple geometric pattern. The clay is smooth and well fired, and the design is understated but sophisticated. It's some of your best work, and you're asking a premium price for it. These are beautiful, she says, and you can tell she means it. How much? 18 denarii for the set, you say, trying to keep your voice casual. It's more than you usually charge, but you have a feeling she'll pay it. She doesn't even blink. I'll take them. Can you have them delivered this afternoon? You nod, trying not to show how happy you are. 80 denarii is more than most people make in a month. With this sale, you'll be able to afford some luxuries, maybe some decent wine or a new cloak for the winter. After Livia leaves, you get back to work. You have a large order to fill. A tavern keeper wants 50 cups, and he wants them by the end of the week. It's repetitive work, but it's the bread and butter of your business. You throw clay on the wheel, shape it, trim it, and set it aside to dry. Over and over and over. The work is meditative in its own way. Your hands know what to do without conscious thought, and your mind is free to wander. You think about the strange smell in the air this morning, and the smoke you saw coming from Vesuvius. You think about the political situation in Rome. There are rumors that the emperor is planning another military campaign, which means higher taxes and more young men drafted into the legions. You think about your family. Your wife died 2 years ago, in childbirth, along with the baby. It's a common enough tragedy in the Roman world, but it still hurts. You have a sister who lives in Rome, but you haven't seen her in years. Travel is expensive and dangerous, and you can't afford to leave your business for weeks at a time. As you work, you can hear the sounds of the city around you. There's the constant clatter of cartwheels, the shouts of merchants, the laughter of children. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing, probably a slave at work. Romans loved music, and they'd sing while they worked, while they marched, while they did pretty much anything. Around midday, you take a break for lunch. You have bread, cheese, and diluted wine, the standard Roman meal. You eat standing up, looking out at the street, and watching the world go by. The heat is starting to build, and you can see people seeking shade wherever they can find it. A group of children runs past, chasing a ball made of rags. They're laughing and shouting, completely oblivious to the adult world of work and worry. It reminds you of your own childhood, back when your biggest concern was whether you'd get in trouble for tracking mud through the house. You notice that the strange haze in the sky has gotten thicker. The sun looks oddly dim, and there's definitely more smoke coming from the mountain. A few people are pointing at it and talking in worried voices, but most folks are going about their business as usual. You finish your lunch and get back to work. You have cups to make, and the clay won't shape itself. But as you're working, you can't shake the feeling that something is different about today. The air feels charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm, and that smell, that sulfurous rotten egg smell, is getting stronger. You're just finishing another cup when you hear a sound that makes your blood run cold. It's a low, rumbling noise, like the world's largest cart rolling over the world's largest cobblestones. The sound seems to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. You look up at Vesuvius, and what you see makes your heart skip a beat. The thin plume of smoke has become a towering column of dark gray ash, rising high into the sky like a giant pine tree, and it's growing bigger by the minute. Well, you say to yourself, that's probably not good. Chapter 5. The First Warning Signs. You're not the only one who's noticed the mountain's sudden change in behavior. People are starting to gather in the streets, pointing at the sky and talking in increasingly worried voices. The cheerful chatter of daily life has been replaced by something more urgent. You step out of your workshop to get a better look. The column of ash rising from Vesuvius is enormous, easily visible from anywhere in the city. It's dark gray, almost black, and it's spreading out at the top like an umbrella. The resemblance to a pine tree is so striking that people are already calling it a pine tree cloud. An old man standing nearby shakes his head grimly. "I've seen this before," he says. "Not here, but in Sicily, when I was young. The mountain there did the same thing," and then he trails off, but the implication is clear. What happened, you ask, though you're not sure you want to know the answer. "The gods were angry," he says simply. "Very angry." As you're standing there, trying to process what you're seeing, you feel something hit your shoulder. You look down and see a small gray pebble. Then another one hits your head, and another. You look up, and the sky is filled with tiny stones falling like hail. They're pumice, volcanic rock that's been blasted out of the mountain and is now raining down on the city. The stones are small at first, no bigger than grapes, but they're falling steadily, and they're clearly getting bigger. People are starting to panic now. Some are running for cover, others are just standing there in shock. A few are kneeling in the streets, praying to whatever gods they think might be listening. The pumice stones are bouncing off rooftops and hitting people in the head, and the noise is incredible, like being inside a drum during a hailstorm. You duck back into your workshop, but you can hear the stones hitting your roof. The sound is getting louder and more frequent. You grab a thick cloak and wrap it around your head and shoulders. If you're going to go outside, you're going to need protection. You venture back out into the street, and the scene is surreal. The ground is already covered with a layer of grey pumice stones, and they're still falling. People are stumbling around, trying to protect themselves with whatever they can find: cloaks, baskets, even pottery. A woman runs past you, carrying a baby and screaming something about the end of the world. A man is trying to load his cart with possessions, but the pumice stones are making it nearly impossible. Every few seconds, a larger stone falls, and someone cries out in pain. You realize you need to make a decision. You can stay in your workshop and hope the building holds up, or you can try to get out of the city. But where would you go? The roads are probably already clogged with people trying to escape, and the pumice is falling everywhere. You look around at your workshop, at the pottery you've spent years perfecting, at the life you've built here. The idea of leaving it all behind is heartbreaking, but the alternative might be worse. As you're wrestling with this decision, you hear a new sound, a deep booming noise that seems to come from the earth itself. The ground shakes, and you have to grab onto a wall to keep from falling. Earthquake. Of course, as if raining stones weren't enough. The shaking stops after a few seconds, but you can see cracks in some of the buildings. A few roof tiles have fallen, adding to the chaos in the streets. And still, the pumice keeps falling. You notice that the stones are getting bigger. What started as pebbles are now the size of walnuts, and they're falling faster. When one hits you in the shoulder, it actually hurts. You're going to have bruises tomorrow, assuming there is a tomorrow. A neighbor appears at your door. It's Marcus, a baker who owns the shop next to yours. He's covered in grey dust, and there's a cut on his forehead from a falling stone. "Have you seen my wife?" he asks frantically. "She went to the market this morning, and I can't find her." You shake your head. "I haven't seen her." "But Marcus, we need to think about getting out of here. This is only going to get worse." He looks at you like you're crazy. "Leave. This is my home, my business. Everything I have is here. And it won't do you any good if you're dead," you point out. He stares at you for a moment, then looks up at the sky. The column of ash has grown even larger, and it's starting to bend over the city, like a threatening finger. The pumice stones are now the size of eggs, and they're falling with enough force to dent metal. "Maybe you're right," he says quietly, "but where can we go?" It's a good question. Pompeii sits in the shadow of Vesuvius, but the mountain is huge. Its influence extends for miles in every direction. The logical escape route would be by sea, get to the harbor and sail away from the disaster. But the harbor is on the other side of the city, and the streets are becoming increasingly dangerous. As you're discussing options with Marcus, you hear screaming from down the street. A section of roof has collapsed under the weight of the pumice stones, and people are trapped underneath. Several men are trying to dig them out, but it's dangerous work. More stones are falling all the time, and the building could collapse further at any moment. You and Marcus run to help. The trapped people are a family, a man, woman, and 2 children. The man is conscious and shouting instructions, but his legs are pinned under a heavy beam. The woman is unconscious, and the children are crying hysterically. You grab one end of the beam and start to lift. It's incredibly heavy, and the falling pumice stones are making it hard to see and breathe. But slowly, painfully, you manage to free the man's legs. He's badly injured, probably broken bones, but he's alive. Getting the woman out is harder. She's trapped under a pile of roof tiles and stone, and every time you move something, more debris falls down. But eventually, you manage to clear enough space to pull her free. She's breathing, but she's badly hurt. The children are easier. They're small enough to squeeze through gaps in the debris. They're terrified and covered in dust, but they don't seem to be seriously injured. We need to get them to a healer, Marcus says, but you shake your head. Look around, you say. Everyone needs a healer, and I don't think any of them are going to be in business much longer. The family manages to stand, helping each other despite their injuries. The man thanks you profusely, but you can see the desperation in his eyes. He has no idea what to do next, and honestly, neither do you. The pumice stones are now the size of small rocks, and they're falling with devastating force. Windows are breaking, roofs are collapsing, and people are being seriously injured. The streets are becoming rivers of grey stone, and it's getting harder and harder to move around. You realize that you can't stay here much longer. The question is, where can you go? Chapter 6. The Darkening Sky. By mid-afternoon, the sky has turned the color of old blood. The massive column of ash from Vesuvius has spread out like a vast umbrella, blocking out the sun and casting the city into an eerie twilight. The pumice stones are now the size of your fist, and they're falling with deadly force. You've made your decision. You're going to try to reach the harbor and get out by sea. It's probably your only chance. You've gathered what you can carry, some food, water, a few coins, and your most precious possessions. Everything else will have to stay behind. Marcus has decided to come with you. His wife never returned from the market, and he's hoping she had the same idea about escaping by sea. It's a slim hope, but it's all he has. The journey through the city is a nightmare. The streets are knee-deep in pumice stones, and you have to climb over debris from collapsed buildings. The falling stones are so thick that you can barely see 10 feet ahead. You're wearing every piece of clothing you own, layered for protection, but the larger stones still hurt when they hit. People are everywhere, all trying to escape, all panicking. Some are carrying impossible loads, entire furniture sets, bags of grain, even livestock. Others have given up on possessions and are just running with whatever they can grab. Children are crying, adults are shouting, and underneath it all is the constant roar of falling stone. You pass a temple where people have gathered, hoping the gods will protect them. The priest is leading prayers, but his voice is barely audible over the noise. The temple's roof is holding up better than most buildings, but even it's starting to sag under the weight of the pumice. The gods are testing us, the priest shouts. We must have faith. You wonder what kind of test requires raining rocks from the sky, but you don't have time to discuss theology. You need to keep moving. The air is getting hard to breathe. It's thick with ash and dust, and every breath tastes like sand. You've torn strips from your cloak to wrap around your faces, but it's not much help. People around you are coughing and wheezing, and some are starting to collapse from the strain. You help an old woman who's fallen in the street. She's disoriented and confused, and she keeps asking for her daughter. You and Marcus help her to her feet, but she's too weak to walk on her own. Leave me, she says. I'm too old for this. Save yourselves. But you can't just abandon her. You and Marcus take her arms and help her along, even though it slows you down considerably. The pumice stones are hitting all three of you, and you're all getting battered and bruised. As you're making your way through the city, you start to notice bodies in the streets. People who were caught in the open when the larger stones started falling. People who were too old or too young or too injured to keep moving. The reality of the situation is starting to sink in. This isn't just a natural disaster. This is a catastrophe on a scale that's hard to comprehend. You reach the main street that leads to the harbor, and you can see that hundreds of other people had the same idea. The road is packed with refugees, all moving in the same direction, but the going is slow. The pumice stones are making it hard to move, and the crowd is so thick that people are getting trampled. You hear shouting up ahead. A section of the road has been blocked by a collapsed building, and people are trapped. Some are trying to climb over the debris. Others are looking for alternate routes. The panic is spreading through the crowd like wildfire. That's when you hear the sound that makes your blood turn to ice, to deep throaty roar, like the world's largest predator announcing its presence. You look back toward Vesuvius, and what you see defies belief. The mountain is glowing. Not just the top, but the entire visible slope is lit up with an orange-red light, and there's something flowing down the mountainside, something that moves like water, but glows like fire. Pyroclastic flow, you whisper, though you don't know that term. What you do know is that whatever is coming down the mountain is moving fast, and it's heading straight for the city. The crowd has seen it too. The panic reaches a new level. People are screaming, pushing, fighting to get away from the approaching death. Some are trampled in the chaos. Others are trapped against walls and buildings, unable to move in any direction. You realize that you're not going to make it to the harbor. The crowd is too thick, the obstacles too numerous, and the approaching flow too fast. You need to find shelter, and you need to find it now. You look around frantically. Most of the buildings along the street are damaged or collapsed, but you spot a large public building, maybe a bathhouse or a gymnasium, that looks more solid than the others. Its walls are thick stone, and while part of the roof has fallen in, there's still a section that looks intact. This way, you shout to Marcus, and you start pushing through the crowd toward the building. The old woman is barely conscious now, and you're essentially carrying her. Getting through the crowd is like swimming through molasses. Everyone is trying to move in different directions, and no one is thinking clearly. You get separated from Marcus for a terrifying moment, but then you see him fighting his way toward you. You reach the building and find an entrance that's partially blocked by debris. You manage to squeeze through, dragging the old woman with you. Marcus is right behind you, and then you're inside. The interior of the building is dark and filled with dust. Part of the roof has collapsed, and pumice stones are still falling through the hole. But there's a section in the back that's still covered, and it seems relatively stable. You make your way to the back of the building, helping the old woman settle against a wall. She's barely conscious, but she's breathing. Marcus finds some water in a broken amphora and helps her drink a little. "What was that thing coming down the mountain?" Marcus asks, his voice shaking. You shake your head. "I don't know, but whatever it was moving fast, and it was hot. I could feel the heat from here." Through the hole in the roof, you can see that the sky has turned completely black. The pumice stones are still falling, but they're smaller now, maybe the size of grapes again. The constant noise is deafening, like being inside a drum during a hailstorm. Other people have found their way into the building. There's a family with 3 children, an old man who keeps mumbling prayers, and a young woman who's clearly in shock. Everyone is covered in gray dust, and everyone looks terrified. "How long do you think this will last?" the young woman asks. Nobody has an answer. This is beyond anyone's experience. Mountains aren't supposed to explode. The sky isn't supposed to rain rocks. The world isn't supposed to end on a Tuesday afternoon. Chapter 7. The Long Night. Hours pass. The pumice continues to fall, though it's lighter now, more like heavy snow than deadly hail. The sound is still constant, but it's become background noise, like rain on a roof. You've all adjusted to this new reality, where the world is ending in slow motion. The old woman you helped has been drifting in and out of consciousness. Her name is Claudia, and she's been telling you about her life in fragments. She had 7 children, but only 3 survived to adulthood. Her husband died in a grain accident 10 years ago. She's been living alone, supported by her son, who works as a scribe. He's in Rome. She whispers. He's safe. That's something. The family with the children has been trying to keep their kids calm. The parents are clearly terrified, but they're putting on a brave face. The father keeps telling stories, old legends about heroes and gods, while the mother shares out their meager food supplies. The children don't really understand what's happening. To them, this is just a very strange day where the sky is dark and rocks are falling. They're more confused than scared, which is probably a blessing. Marcus has been pacing near the entrance, looking out at the street. The flow stopped, he reports. Whatever that glowing thing was, it didn't make it this far. You feel a moment of relief, but then you remember the harbor. All those people who were trying to escape by sea. Did they make it? Or did that glowing death catch them first? The old man who's been praying suddenly starts laughing. It's not a happy laugh. It's the sound of someone whose mind has snapped under the pressure. The gods are angry, he says, still laughing. We've offended them somehow. Maybe we didn't sacrifice enough bulls. Maybe we didn't pray hard enough. Maybe we just existed too loudly. The gods aren't angry, Marcus says firmly. This is just something that happened. Mountains do this sometimes. My grandfather told me stories about it happening in other places. Your grandfather was a liar, the old man says, but he stopped laughing. Mountains don't vomit fire and stone. Only angry gods do that. You're not sure who's right. Roman religion is all about keeping the gods happy through proper sacrifices and rituals. But this seems like something beyond the realm of normal divine displeasure. This feels like the earth itself is in pain. The young woman has been quiet for hours, but now she starts talking. Her name is Julia, and she was supposed to be married next month. Her fiancé went to Rome on business last week, and she's been planning the wedding feast. We were going to have roasted peacock, she says dreamily, and honey cakes, and wine from Gaul. It was going to be perfect. She's clearly in shock, focusing on details that don't matter anymore. But talking seems to help her, so you let her continue. My dress was beautiful. White silk with gold embroidery. My mother spent months working on it. She said I would look like a goddess. The mother of the family reaches over and takes Julia's hand. You still will, she says gently. This will pass and you'll have your wedding. But you can see in her eyes that she doesn't believe it. None of you do. The world you knew this morning is gone, buried under tons of volcanic rock. Even if you survive this, nothing will ever be the same. As the night wears on, people start to fall asleep. Despite the constant noise, exhaustion is stronger than fear, and your bodies are shutting down, whether you want them to or not. You find yourself dozing fitfully, waking every few minutes to the sound of falling stone. In your dreams, you're back in your workshop, making pottery. Everything is normal. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the only sounds are the familiar ones of city life. You're working on a beautiful vase, taking your time to get the shape just right. Then you wake up to the sound of coughing. The air in the building has gotten thicker, filled with fine ash that's drifting in through the hole in the roof. Everyone is having trouble breathing, and the children are starting to wheeze. We need to cover our faces, you say, and everyone starts tearing strips from their clothing. The makeshift masks help a little, but the ash is so fine that it gets through everything. You realize that this might be how it ends. Not crushed by falling rocks, not burned by flowing fire, but slowly suffocated by ash, so fine it's like breathing sand. It's not the heroic death that Roman stories talk about. It's just quiet, gradual, almost peaceful. The old woman Claudia has stopped talking. She's still breathing, but it's shallow and labored. You hold her hand, and she squeezes back weakly. Tell me about your pottery, she whispers. So you do. You tell her about the clay you choose, how you prepare it, how you shape it on the wheel. You tell her about glazes and firing temperatures and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from nothing but earth and water. She listens with her eyes closed, and for a moment you both forget about the falling ash and the ruined world outside. You're just two people sharing stories in the darkness. "I would have liked to see your work," she says. "Maybe you will," you reply, though you know it's a lie. She smiles and closes her eyes. A few minutes later, her breathing stops. Chapter 8. Dawn of a New World. When dawn finally comes, it's barely visible through the thick ash in the air. The pumice has mostly stopped falling, replaced by a fine grey snow that settles on everything like a blanket. The world has gone silent, except for the occasional crash of a building collapsing under the weight of volcanic debris. You're one of only 4 people left alive in the building. The old man died sometime during the night, and 2 of the children succumbed to the ash. The survivors are you, Marcus, Julia, and the mother from the family, a woman named Livia, not the same one who bought your pottery yesterday. That feels like a lifetime ago. The air is still thick and hard to breathe, but it's better than it was. You can actually see across the room now, though everything is covered in a thick layer of grey ash. It's like the world has been painted in shades of death. "We need to try to get out," Marcus says. His voice is hoarse from breathing ash all night. "We can't stay here much longer." You nod, but you're not sure where you'd go. The city is buried under several feet of pumice and ash. The streets are gone. The buildings are collapsed or damaged beyond repair. This isn't a place where people live anymore. This is a graveyard. You help the others to their feet. Julia is still in shock, moving like a sleepwalker. Livia is holding herself together through sheer force of will, but you can see the cracks in her facade. Marcus looks like he's aged 10 years in one night. You make your way to the entrance of the building. The doorway is partially blocked by debris, but you can squeeze through. What you see outside defies description. The city of Pompeii is gone. In its place is a grey wasteland of ash and pumice. The buildings that are still standing look like ghosts, their walls covered in thick layers of volcanic debris. The streets have disappeared completely, replaced by rolling hills of grey stone. Bodies are everywhere. People caught in the open when the pumice started falling. People who couldn't find shelter. People who found shelter but couldn't survive the ash. They're all grey now, covered in the same volcanic dust that's coating everything else. "Dear gods," Livia whispers. You start walking, or rather climbing. The layer of pumice is so thick that you're essentially walking on top of a new landscape. Occasionally, you see the top of a building poking through, like an island in a sea of grey. The silence is oppressive. No birds, no insects, no sound of human activity, just the crunch of pumice under your feet and the labored breathing of your companions. Even the wind seems to have died. You're heading toward where you think the harbor might be, though you're not sure you'd recognize it if you found it. The entire geography of the area has changed. Hills have appeared where there were none before. Valleys have been filled in. The familiar landmarks are gone. As you walk, you start to see other survivors. They emerge from collapsed buildings like ghosts, covered in ash, and moving with the slow, uncertain gait of people who've seen too much. Nobody speaks. What is there to say? You pass what used to be the forum. The columns are still standing, but they're buried up to their capitals. The temples are gone, collapsed under the weight of the pumice. The place where you haggled for clay yesterday is now just another hill in the grey landscape. "My bakery," Marcus says suddenly. He's looking at a pile of rubble that might once have been a building. 30 years I worked there. My father's business before that. There's nothing left. Not even enough to identify what it used to be. Just grey stone and ash like everything else. Julia suddenly stops walking. "I want to go home," she says. It's the first thing she said since last night. "There is no home," Livia says gently. "Not anymore." Julia stares at her for a moment, then starts crying. Not the hysterical sobbing you might expect, but quiet tears that track through the ash on her cheeks. Marcus puts an arm around her shoulders, and she leans into him. You keep walking. What else can you do? The sun is getting higher, and the ash in the air is starting to settle. You can see a little farther now, and what you see is always the same. Gray hills, gray buildings, gray death. You find other survivors as you go. A man looking for his children, a woman carrying a baby that might or might not be alive, an old priest who keeps mumbling prayers to gods who apparently weren't listening yesterday. You don't form a group exactly, but you move in the same direction, drawn by the same desperate hope that somewhere ahead is a place where the world still makes sense. You reach what used to be the edge of the city. The harbor should be just ahead, but all you can see is more gray landscape. The sea is there, you can smell it, but the shoreline has changed. The harbor is filled with pumice and ash, and the water is the color of mud. There are ships in the harbor, but they're sitting on solid ground now. The pumice has displaced so much water that what used to be the sea floor is now dry land. The ships look like toys left by a giant child who got bored and wandered away. The sea is gone, Marcus says in wonder. Not gone, exactly, but changed. The water is there, but it's farther out, and it's not the blue Mediterranean you remember. It's gray and murky, full of ash and debris. Even if you could reach it, you're not sure you'd want to drink it or swim in it. You see movement near one of the ships, other survivors maybe, or looters picking through the wreckage. You're too tired to care which. The fight has gone out of you, replaced by a kind of numb acceptance. You sit down on a pile of pumice that used to be someone's house. The others sit with you, forming a small circle of shared misery. The sun is fully up now, and the ash in the air is starting to settle. The world is becoming visible again, but it's not a world you recognize. What do we do now? Julia asks. It's a good question. The obvious answer is to keep walking, to try to find a place that wasn't destroyed, to start over somewhere else. But you're not sure you have the strength for that, and you're not sure there is anywhere else. The Roman Empire is vast, and Pompeii was just one city among hundreds. Life will go on, people will rebuild, the world will continue to turn. But your world, the world of craftsmen and merchants, of familiar streets and daily routines, that world is gone forever. You think about the pottery you left behind in your workshop. It's probably buried under tons of ash now, broken beyond repair. All those hours of work, all that careful craftsmanship, gone. It seems like such a small thing compared to the loss of human life, but it hurts nonetheless. Marcus is thinking similar thoughts. I had recipes, he says, bread recipes that my family had been perfecting for generations. They're gone now, not just the recipes, but the knowledge, the techniques, the little secrets that made our bread special. Livia nods. I was teaching my daughter to weave. She was getting so good at it. She had such clever fingers. She pauses, and you realize she's talking about her daughter in the past tense, the child who didn't make it through the night. You all sit in silence for a while, mourning not just the dead, but the lost knowledge, the broken traditions, the interrupted lives. In a single day, centuries of accumulated wisdom have been buried under volcanic ash. But as you sit there, you start to notice something. The ash has stopped falling completely. The air is clearing, and in the distance, you can see other people moving around. Not many, but some. The world hasn't ended completely. It's just different. We should keep moving, you say eventually. Find other survivors, see what's left. The others nod. Julia wipes her eyes and stands up. Marcus helps Livia to her feet. You all start walking again, leaving the buried city behind. As you walk, you start to plan. Not long-term plans, those seem impossible now, but immediate practical things. You need to find food and clean water. You need to find shelter for the night. You need to find out how far the destruction extends. Most importantly, you need to find other people. Humans are social creatures, and you can't survive alone in this gray wasteland. You need community, cooperation, shared knowledge, and shared hope. You think about the stories that will be told about this day. How will future generations remember what happened here? Will they understand the terror and the loss, or will it just become another tale of divine wrath, a cautionary story about the dangers of offending the gods? You hope they'll remember the people, not just the famous ones who will be written about in history books, but the ordinary people who lived and died here, the bakers and potters, the merchants and slaves, the children and elders, the people who made this place a community, not just a collection of buildings. You hope they'll remember that this wasn't just a natural disaster. This was the end of a world, the death of a way of life, the burial of thousands of individual stories. Each person who died here had hopes and dreams, fears and loves, stories that will never be told. As you walk away from the ruins of Pompeii, you make a promise to yourself. If you survive this, if you find a new place to live and work, you'll remember, you'll tell the stories, you'll keep the memory alive. Behind you, the city lies buried and silent. Ahead, the future is uncertain, but you're alive, and that's something. In a world where mountains can explode and cities can disappear in a single day, being alive is everything. The sun is getting higher, and the ash in the air is continuing to settle. You can see farther now, and what you see gives you hope. In the distance, there are green hills that the ash didn't reach. There are places where the world is still the world, where life continues, where people are going about their daily business, unaware of the catastrophe that occurred just miles away. You're walking toward those green hills, toward whatever comes next. Your old life is gone, buried under tons of volcanic rock, but you're not dead yet, and as long as you're alive, there's possibility. The Roman Empire will survive this. Cities will be rebuilt, populations will recover, life will go on. But Pompeii, your Pompeii, the city you knew and loved and complained about, that's gone forever. It exists now only in memory, in the stories that survivors will tell, in the archaeological record that future generations will uncover. You think about those future archaeologists, digging through the ash and finding the remnants of your life, your pottery, your tools, your home. What will they make of it? What will they think about the people who lived here? You hope they'll understand that you were real, that you had feelings and dreams and fears just like them, that you loved and laughed and worried about paying the rent, that you were human, not just a historical curiosity. But that's a concern for the future. Right now, you have more immediate worries. You need to find food, water, and shelter. You need to survive the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. You're walking toward the green hills, toward whatever comes next. The past is buried behind you. The future is uncertain ahead of you. But you're alive. You're moving. You're hoping. And sometimes, that's enough. Chapter 9. The Refugee Road. You've been walking for hours now, and the little group of survivors has grown. More people have emerged from the ruins, all heading in the same direction, away from the buried city, toward the hope of untouched land. You're maybe 30 people now, a ragtag band of the lucky and the stubborn. The road, if you can call it that, is nothing like the well-maintained Roman highways you're used to. This is just a path beaten through the ash and pumice by the feet of refugees. Every step is uncertain. Every hill might hide another collapsed building or another body. You've taken on the role of unofficial leader, though you never asked for it. People just started looking to you for decisions, which way to go, when to rest, how to divide the meager supplies that various people managed to salvage. It's not a role you wanted, but it's one you've accepted. Marcus is still with you, but Julia died 3 hours ago. The ash in her lungs finally overwhelmed her, and she just stopped walking, sat down on a pile of rubble, and quietly faded away. She died holding the hand of a stranger, talking about her wedding dress. Marcus said a prayer over her body, but you couldn't spare the time or energy for a proper burial. There will be time for proper mourning later, if there is a later. Livia is stronger than she looks. She's become the group's unofficial healer, tending to cuts and burns with strips torn from her own clothes. She's lost her children, her home, her entire world, but she keeps moving forward with a determination that amazes you. The newest member of your group is a boy, maybe 12 years old, who you found sitting beside the bodies of his parents. He hasn't spoken a word since you found him, but he follows the group obediently. Someone, you think it was Livia, started calling him Silence, the Silent One. He seems to accept the name. You're following what used to be the main road to Nuceria, though the landscape has changed so much that you're navigating more by the sun than by landmarks. The volcanic ash has transformed the entire region. Hills have appeared where there were none before. Rivers have changed course or disappeared entirely. It's like walking through an alien world. But as you get farther from Vesuvius, things start to look more normal. The layer of ash gets thinner. You start to see patches of green, grass and bushes that survived the disaster. You even hear a bird singing, the first natural sound you've heard in what feels like years. "Look," says Marcus, pointing ahead. "Smoke. It's not the gray, poisonous smoke of the volcano. This is the white smoke of cooking fires, of normal human activity." Your pace quickens involuntarily. After walking through a landscape of death, the promise of life is intoxicating. You crest a hill and see it. A small farmstead that was just far enough from the mountain to escape the worst of the disaster. There's ash on the ground, but the buildings are intact. There are people moving around, and you can smell food cooking. The farmer and his family are wary at first. 30 ash-covered refugees appearing out of nowhere would be alarming under any circumstances. But when they hear your story, when they understand what you've been through, their weariness turns to compassion. "We felt the ground shake," the farmer says, "and we saw the mountain burning, but we had no idea, we never imagined." He trails off, looking at your group with something like awe. You realize that you're not just refugees, you're witnesses to something unprecedented. You're the people who saw the end of the world and lived to tell about it. The farmer's wife brings out bread and cheese, and water, clean, fresh water that tastes like the most expensive wine. You have to force yourself to drink slowly to not make yourself sick. Around you, the other survivors are doing the same, rediscovering the simple pleasure of food and drink. "What will you do now?" the farmer asks. It's a question you've been avoiding. What do you do when your entire world has been destroyed? How do you rebuild a life from nothing? "We'll keep walking," you say. "Find a place to settle. Start over." The farmer nods. "There's a town about a day's walk north of here. Nuceria. They'll take you in. Romans help Romans." You hope he's right. You hope there's still enough civilization left to have compassion for refugees. You hope the world hasn't become so hard that 30 homeless people are seen as a burden rather than fellow human beings. You rest at the farm for a few hours, just long enough to eat and drink and tend to the worst injuries. The farmer gives you what supplies he can spare. Some food, a water skin, a few tools. It's not much, but it's generous considering he's feeding 30 unexpected guests. As you prepare to leave, the farmer pulls you aside. "I'm sorry," he says quietly, "about your city, about your people. I can't imagine what it was like." You nod, not trusting yourself to speak. The kindness is almost harder to bear than the disaster itself. It reminds you that there's still good in the world, that not everything has been destroyed. "We'll remember," you say finally. "We'll tell the story. We'll make sure people know what happened." The farmer nods solemnly. "That's important. The dead deserve to be remembered." You gather your group and start walking again. The sun is getting lower, and you want to cover as much ground as possible before dark. The road to Nuceria is longer than you'd like, but at least it's a real road with real milestones and real destinations. As you walk, you start to plan, not just the immediate future, where to sleep tonight, what to eat tomorrow, but the longer term. You're a potter, and people need pots. You can rebuild your trade, establish yourself in a new city, create a new life, but you'll never forget the old one. You'll never forget the smell of Pompeii in the morning, the sound of cartwheels on volcanic stone, the taste of bread from Marcus's bakery. You'll never forget the people who didn't make it out, who are buried forever under tons of ash. You think about Claudia, the old woman who died holding your hand. You think about Julia, who died dreaming of her wedding. You think about the children who never got to grow up, the craftsmen who never got to finish their work, the lovers who never got to say goodbye. Their stories will die with you unless you tell them, unless you keep their memory alive through words, through the tales you'll tell in taverns and marketplaces, through the legacy you'll leave to your own children, if you ever have any. This is your responsibility. Now, you're not just a survivor. You're a keeper of memory, a guardian of the dead, a living link to a world that no longer exists. Chapter 10. The New Beginning. Nuceria is larger than you expected, and older. The town has been here for centuries, and it shows. The buildings are solid stone, built to last. The streets are wide and well maintained. After the chaos of the disaster, the simple orderliness of normal city life is almost overwhelming. The townspeople are curious about your group, but not unwelcoming. Word has already reached them about the destruction of Pompeii and Herculaneum. They've been expecting refugees, and they've made preparations. There's a large public building, a meeting hall, that's been converted into temporary housing for displaced people. You're given a small space in the corner of the hall, just enough room for you and your few possessions. It's not much, but it's clean and dry and safe. After sleeping in ruins and walking through ash-covered wasteland, it feels like luxury. The town's leaders interview each refugee, trying to understand what skills they have and how they might contribute to the community. When your turn comes, you explain that you're a potter, and immediately you can see interest in the interviewer's eyes. We have a pottery workshop that's been closed for months, he says. The previous owner died, and his children moved to Rome. If you're interested, we could arrange for you to take it over. You feel a surge of hope, a workshop, a chance to practice your craft again, to create something beautiful from clay and fire. It's not your old workshop, but it's a beginning. The next morning, you go to look at the space. It's smaller than what you had in Pompeii, but it's well equipped. There's a good kiln, a potter's wheel, tools and shelves for storing finished pieces. The previous owner knew his business. You run your hands over the wheel, feeling the familiar smoothness of the wood. You pick up a piece of clay and test its consistency. It's different from the clay you used in Pompeii. This is from local sources, with its own unique properties, but it's good clay. You can work with this. Marcus has found work at a bakery. The owner is an old man who's been looking for someone to train as his successor. I know bread, Marcus says with the first smile you've seen from him since the disaster. I can teach this town how to make real bread. Livia has been taken in by a family who lost their daughter to fever last year. She's helping to care for their remaining children, and they're helping her heal from her own losses. It's a good arrangement for everyone. The boy Silence is staying with the town's priest. He still doesn't speak, but he started helping with the temple duties. The priest thinks the routine and ritual might help him process his trauma. Maybe someday he'll find his voice again. You spend the first week just getting the workshop ready. Cleaning, organizing, testing the equipment. You're not ready to make anything yet. You need to understand the local clay, the local customers, the local market, but it feels good to be working with your hands again, to be preparing for a future instead of just surviving day to day. The townspeople are curious about your story, about what really happened in Pompeii. You find yourself telling the tale over and over, each time adding more details, each time making it more real. It becomes a performance, a way of honoring the dead and educating the living. You tell them about the morning of the disaster, about the strange smells and the smoke from the mountain. You tell them about the pumice stones, about the panic in the streets, about the people who helped strangers and the people who were trampled in the rush to escape. You tell them about the old woman who died holding your hand, about the young woman who died dreaming of her wedding, about the children who never got to grow up. You make them real, these people who are now just names in the casualty lists. And slowly, as you tell the story, you begin to heal. Not completely. You'll never completely heal from what you've seen, but enough to function, enough to build a new life, enough to find meaning in survival. One evening, as you're working late in the workshop, a young woman comes to visit. She's heard your story, and she wants to commission a piece of pottery, something special, something meaningful. "I want you to make me a vase," she says. "Something beautiful, something that will last." You nod, understanding. She wants something that will outlive her, something that will carry her memory forward into the future. It's the same impulse that drives you to tell your story, to keep the memory of Pompeii alive. You start work on the vase the next morning. It's the first piece you've made since the disaster, and your hands are shaky at first. But as you work, the old skills come back. The clay responds to your touch, taking shape under your fingers. You make it beautiful, graceful lines, perfect proportions, a surface that's smooth as silk, but you also make it strong, built to last for centuries. This vase will survive long after you're gone, long after the young woman who commissioned it is gone, long after everyone who remembers Pompeii is dead. And maybe someday, someone will find it and wonder about the potter who made it. Maybe they'll wonder about the world he lived in, the stories he told, the disaster he survived. Maybe they'll understand that behind every artifact, every piece of pottery, every ancient object, there's a human story. As you work, you think about the future, not just your own future, but the future of civilization itself. Pompeii is gone, but Rome endures. The empire continues. People still fall in love, still have children, still create beautiful things, still tell stories around the fire. The volcanic ash that destroyed your city also preserved it. Centuries from now, archaeologists will dig through that ash and discover the world you lived in. They'll find your pottery, your tools, your house. They'll piece together the story of how you lived and how you died. But they won't find you. They won't find the stories you told, the people you loved, the dreams you had. Those things live only in memory, and memory is fragile. That's why you have to tell the story, why you have to keep the past alive through words and craftsmanship and the simple act of remembering. You finish the vase and set it aside to dry. Tomorrow you'll fire it, and then it will be ready for its new owner. It will be beautiful and strong, a testament to the human impulse to create something lasting in a world where nothing lasts forever. You look around the workshop, your new workshop, in your new town, in your new life. It's not the same as what you had before, but it's something. It's a place to work, a place to create, a place to rebuild. Outside, the sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It reminds you of the glow from Vesuvius on that terrible day. But it's different now. This is natural beauty, not natural disaster. This is the promise of tomorrow, not the threat of today. You lock up the workshop and walk home through the quiet streets of Narration. Tomorrow you'll get up and work with clay, just as you did in Pompeii. Tomorrow Marcus will bake bread, just as he did before. Tomorrow Livia will care for children, just as she always has. Life goes on, it changes, it adapts, it finds new forms and new expressions, but it goes on. And as long as it goes on, as long as people remember and tell stories and create beautiful things, the past is never truly dead. You are a survivor, but you're also a bridge. You connect the world that was with the world that is, the dead with the living, the past with the future. It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also a privilege. You carry the stories of the dead, and in carrying them, you keep them alive. Final epilogue, the long echo of history. And that's where we'll leave our potter, in his new workshop in Nuceria, beginning again, because that's what people do. They survive, they adapt, they rebuild. The human spirit is remarkably resilient, and even in the face of absolute catastrophe, life finds a way to continue. The real story of Pompeii isn't just about the disaster, it's about the people who lived through it, who survived it, who carried their stories forward into the future. Some of them, like our fictional potter, found new homes and new lives. Others died on the refugee roads, or succumbed to disease, or simply faded away into the vastness of the Roman Empire. But their stories matter. Every one of them had a name, a family, a set of dreams and fears and hopes. They were real people living real lives, and their experiences deserve to be remembered and honored. When archaeologists first began excavating Pompeii in the 18th century, they found a city frozen in time, but they also found something more. They found humanity. In the graffiti on the walls, in the tools left behind, in the shapes of bodies preserved in ash, they found evidence of lives lived fully, passionately, imperfectly. The people of Pompeii complained about politics and bad weather. They fell in love and got their hearts broken. They worried about money and gossiped about their neighbors. They were, in other words, just like us. And that's the real lesson of Pompeii. We're all connected across time by our shared humanity. The potter who worked clay in ancient Pompeii has more in common with a modern artist than he does with the marble statues that represent classical Rome in our imagination. History isn't about dates and dynasties and great men making great decisions. History is about ordinary people living extraordinary lives, finding meaning and beauty and connection in a world that can be both wonderful and terrible. So the next time you're having a rough day, remember our potter. Remember that he lost everything, his home, his business, his world, and still found the strength to start over. Remember that he faced the literal end of the world and chose to keep creating, keep telling stories, keep believing in tomorrow. Remember that you are part of the same human story that began in the caves of our ancestors and continues in the stars we're reaching for. You are connected to every person who has ever lived, ever loved, ever hoped for something better. And remember that your story matters too. The things you create, the people you love, the kindness you show, these things echo forward through time, shaping the world in ways you'll never fully understand. The ash that buried Pompeii also preserved it, creating a window into the past that allows us to see our ancestors as they really were. In the same way, the stories we tell about the past shape the way future generations will understand us. So tell your stories, create beautiful things, be kind to strangers, love deeply, and risk everything. Because in the end, that's all we have. Our stories, our connections, our commitment to keeping the flame of human dignity burning bright. The mountain may explode, the city may be buried, the empire may fall, but the human spirit endures. It adapts, it survives, it finds new ways to flourish. And that, my friends, is the real miracle of Pompeii. Not that it was destroyed, but that it was remembered. Not that people died, but that their lives mattered. Not that the world ended, but that it began again. Thanks for joining me on this journey through one of history's most dramatic days. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the human side of ancient disaster, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what other stories from the past you'd like to explore. And as always, you can find ad-free versions of these videos on my Patreon. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep remembering that you are part of something magnificent, the ongoing story of human civilization, with all its triumphs and tragedies, all its beauty and terror, all its endless capacity for renewal. Sleep well and dream of better days ahead.